She had built an empire from nothing, and tonight she was going to burn it all down. Diana Frost, 30 years old, CEO of one of the fastest rising tech companies in the country, sat alone in her darkened office at 11:47 p.m., a resignation letter open on her screen. Not because she had failed, because she was exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't fix. Exhausted from pretending that losing the use of her legs hadn't hollowed something out of her. Exhausted from watching the people she trusted walk away. Exhausted from being strong for a company that never once asked if she was okay. She was ready to disappear, but told, if this kind of story hits you somewhere deep, you're in the right place. Subscribe to the channel and follow this story all the way to the end, because what happens next is the kind of thing most people never see coming. Hit like if you're already invested, and drop a comment telling me what city and country you're watching from. I want to know how far this story has traveled. Now, let's go back to the night everything changed. The resignation letter had taken her 40 minutes to write. That wasn't because Diana Frost was slow with words. She had never been slow with anything in her life. She had given shareholder presentations without notes, negotiated contracts across 4 time zones without breaking a sweat, fired a VP of operations in the same calm tone she used to order coffee. Words, in a professional context, had always come easily to her. But this was different. This wasn't a memo. This wasn't a strategic communication. This was the moment she admitted to herself, in writing, formally, with her full name attached, that she was done. She read the draft again. Effective immediately, I am resigning from my position as Chief Executive Officer of Frost Industries. I want to thank the board, the employees, and our partners for their continued support. I wish the company every success in the future. 3 sentences. 3 sentences to end 7 years of her life. She highlighted the whole thing, held her finger over the delete key for a long moment, then didn't press it. Outside her office window, the city was doing what cities do at midnight, glowing, moving, indifferent. 31 floors down, cars moved through wet streets. The rain had started around 9 and hadn't quit. Diana watched the headlights blur against the pavement and felt something she had gotten very good at ignoring, the specific loneliness of being surrounded by a world that kept moving without you. She'd been in the wheelchair for 14 months. The accident had been quick. The recovery had been anything but. 3 surgeries, 7 months of inpatient rehabilitation, and a return to Frost Industries that the press had called inspiring and triumphant, and half a dozen other words that made her want to put her fist through a wall. Nobody had asked her what it actually felt like. Nobody had wanted to know that she cried in the car on the way to her first board meeting back, not from pain, but from the particular humiliation of needing her driver to help navigate a curb. Nobody had wanted to hear that the thing that broke her wasn't the accident itself. It was the moment she realized that the people around her had quietly started making decisions without her, assuming she was too damaged to handle the load. She had spent 14 months proving them wrong, and tonight, at 11:47 p.m., alone in an office that smelled like recycled air and cold coffee, she wasn't sure proving them wrong had been worth it. Her phone was face down on the desk. She hadn't looked at it in 2 hours. There were 43 unread messages. She knew because the number had been 43 when she flipped it over, and nobody knew was going to text her this late except her assistant, and Marcus only texted in emergencies. She was reaching for her water glass when the security alert hit. Not her phone. The building system. The panel built into the wall to the left of her desk. The one she'd never once seen activate in 4 years of late nights. A flat, even tone. One long beep, then a recorded voice. Access alert, server room B, sublevel 2. Unauthorized badge scan, 11:51 p.m. Diana stared at the panel. Her first instinct was to call security. Her second instinct, the one she acted on, because 14 months of being treated like she needed protecting had done something to her patience, was to go herself. Sublevel 2 was 2 elevator rides and a long corridor away from the executive floor. At this hour, the building was almost entirely empty. The cleaning crew had finished hours ago. The few engineers who kept late hours worked on the 4th floor, not down here. The server room was infrastructure, say, cooling systems, redundant storage. The physical backbone of everything Frost Industries ran in the cloud. Diana had been down here exactly once during the initial build-out, when the company had just moved into this building and she'd wanted to see every inch of what she was paying for. That was 3 years ago. The badge reader outside server room B logged her entry at 11:56 p.m. The room was cold. It was always cold. The cooling systems ran constantly, and the sound was a low, steady hum that you felt in your chest more than you heard with your ears. Rows of server racks stretched the length of the room, blinking blue and green, orderly and quiet, the way they were always supposed to be. Except for the one in the far left corner, which was blinking red. And except for the man crouched in front of it, laptop open on the floor beside him, a tangle of cables running from the rack to a portable diagnostic unit she didn't recognize. He heard her come in. He didn't look up. "Give me 10 minutes, he said. His voice was even. Not startled, not defensive, just matter of fact, like he'd been expecting someone to show up and had already allocated them a slot in his schedule. Diana stopped her chair 6 feet away from him. "Who are you?" she said. He looked up then. 32, maybe 33. Dark circles under his eyes that weren't from tonight. Those were the kind of circles that came from months of not sleeping enough. A faint scar along his jaw, old enough to be unremarkable. He was wearing a Frost Industries contractor badge clipped to the front of his shirt, and his hands— she noticed this because she always noticed hands, a habit from years of reading people across negotiating tables— were completely steady. "Cole Bennett," he said. "Temporary IT. I'm contracted through DataBridge Solutions." He held up the badge briefly, then went back to looking at the screen. "Your RAID array on Rack 7 is failing. Has been for about 6 hours. Whoever monitors your overnight alerts either missed it or logged off early. If it goes another 2 hours without intervention, you're looking at data loss across 3 of your primary client partitions." Diana looked at the blinking red light. "How bad?" "Bad enough." He tapped something on his laptop. "Not catastrophic yet. That's why I'm here instead of calling it in at 9 tomorrow morning." "You came in at midnight to fix this voluntarily." "I came in at midnight because I was already here when the alert tripped, and because it needed to be fixed." He paused. "I can explain my reasoning afterward if that's important to you. Right now I need to focus." She should have found that rude. She'd had executives fired for less. But there was something about the delivery. No deference, no performance, just a man who had a problem in front of him and wanted to deal with it, that made her stay quiet and watch instead. She watched him work for the next several minutes without speaking. He moved through the diagnostic process, the way people moved through tasks they had done so many times. The individual steps had stopped requiring conscious thought. He wasn't fast in a showy way. He was methodical, checking outputs before moving to the next input, not skipping steps because he was confident, and not hesitating because he was unsure. Just working. "Your monitoring system has a gap," he said without looking up. "Rack 7 sits in a blind spot between 2 alert thresholds. It'll fail quietly until it hits a hard crash. You need someone to adjust the parameters. I have an IT department." "I know. The gap's been in the system for about 8 months. He glanced at her briefly. "Which means either nobody caught it or somebody caught it and decided not to prioritize it. Either way, it's a structural problem, not a technical one." Diana said nothing. Because he was right, and she knew it, and the specific shape of that rightness was uncomfortable. She had rebuilt her leadership team twice since the accident. She had restructured reporting lines, brought in a new CTO, approved a full audit of their infrastructure protocols. And somehow, 8 months in, there was still a gap. "You know this company's system well for a temporary contractor," she said. "I've been here 6 weeks. I read the documentation." "All of it?" "It was a slow first week." She looked at him. He was focused on the screen again. "What's your background?" "Systems architecture, mostly. Did enterprise-level infrastructure work for about 8 years, some government contracts. Came back to contract work about a year ago." He reached into the rack and did something with a cable she couldn't see clearly. "More flexibility." "More flexibility." She turned the phrase over. In her experience, people who cited flexibility as their primary professional motivation were either lying or had a reason she hadn't been told yet, sometimes both. "You said you were already here," she said, "at midnight. Finishing up a migration on the 4th floor, ran long." He checked something on the diagnostic unit. "This is going to take another 40 minutes, give or take. You don't have to stay. I know I don't have to stay. The way she said it made him look up again. She met his eyes. She wasn't sure what she was looking for exactly. Whether he would look at the wheelchair, look away from it, do the specific recalibration she had learned to recognize in the first 2 seconds of every new interaction. The micro-adjustment people made when they were figuring out how to talk to her now. He didn't do any of that. He just looked at her the way you looked at someone you were having a conversation with. Okay, he said, and went back to work. She stayed. She wasn't sure why. Maybe because the alternative was going back upstairs to a resignation letter she hadn't deleted yet. Maybe because something about the simplicity of this, a broken thing, a person fixing it, a defined and solvable problem, was the first uncomplicated thing she'd been near in months. Around 12:30, the red light on rack 7 shifted to yellow. That's progress, Cole said, mostly to himself. What happened to the last company you did this for? Diana asked. She hadn't planned the question. It came out of a long silence the way things do when you've stopped censoring yourself. He glanced at her. Which company? The last major infrastructure contract, before the flexibility. He was quiet for a moment, adjusting something on the diagnostic unit. The contract ended, he said. Everything ends. That's not an answer. No, he agreed. It's not. She let it sit. She was good at letting things sit. In her earlier years, she'd pushed too hard, demanded explanations, filled silences aggressively. The accident, among its many unwelcome gifts, had taught her that some silences held more than words. I had a conflict with the way leadership handled something, Cole said eventually. I documented it. They thanked me for my feedback and restructured my role until I left. He paused. Standard procedure. What did you document? A security vulnerability they didn't want to acknowledge because fixing it would have required delaying a product launch. Diana looked at the rack. And they launched on schedule? They did. And the vulnerability? Was exploited 4 months later. He said it without inflection. 112,000 user records. The company settled out of court. The cooling system hummed. Somewhere down the row, another light blinked, steady and green. Why are you telling me this? Diana said. Cole thought about it for a second. Because you asked, he said, and because you don't seem like someone who wants to be handled. Something shifted in her chest that she didn't have a name for immediately. She looked down at her hands in her lap. The hands she still sometimes forgot weren't the problem. The hands that worked just fine, attached to a body that had stopped cooperating in other ways. And she thought about the resignation letter sitting on her screen 31 floors up. This system, she said, if you could fix everything that was wrong with it, not just tonight's problem, everything, what would you need? Cole sat back on his heels and actually thought about it. 3 weeks, full access, 2 good engineers who'll actually implement the changes instead of working around them, and an executive sponsor who'll back the work when someone on the 3rd floor decides it's not a priority. He looked at her. Why? I'm trying to understand what I'd be walking away from, Diana said. It wasn't what she'd meant to say. She'd meant to keep it abstract, hypothetical, the kind of question that sounded like strategic thinking. But it came out honest instead, and once it was out, she didn't take it back. Cole studied her for a moment, not the way people studied her when they were trying to figure out what was appropriate to say to someone in a wheelchair. The way people studied a problem they were genuinely trying to understand. Are you actually considering leaving? He asked. I was writing my resignation letter when your alert came in. Tonight? Tonight. He absorbed that. Didn't react to it dramatically. Didn't tell her not to. Didn't offer the reflexive reassurances people reached for when someone said something unexpectedly vulnerable. He just absorbed it, the way someone did when they were used to hearing hard things without flinching. Can I ask why? He said. Because I'm tired, Diana said. Because I've spent 14 months proving I can still do this, and I'm not sure why I'm still trying to prove it. Because I built this company, and now I feel like a guest in it. The words came out harder than she expected. She pressed her lips together. Because some days, she said, quieter, it would be easier to just stop. The room was quiet for a long moment. Cole looked at the rack, then back at her. The system is failing, he said, because people stopped paying attention to the parts that didn't announce themselves. The obvious stuff gets fixed. The quiet failures get ignored until they become emergencies. He paused. That's not a broken system. That's just what happens when something's been carrying the load for a long time without support. Diana looked at him. Are you still talking about the servers? She said. I'm talking about whatever you need me to be talking about, he said. She held his gaze for a moment. Then, despite everything, the exhaustion, the cold room, the resignation letter, the 14 months of holding herself together with pure force of will, she almost smiled. Fix the servers, Cole, she said. Already on it, he said. Met. At 1:22 a.m., the red light on rack 7 went green. Cole ran a final diagnostic, saved the output, disconnected his equipment, and began methodically coiling his cables. Diana watched him work through the cleanup with the same steady efficiency he'd brought to everything else. It'll hold, he said, but the underlying configuration needs a permanent fix. I'll document what I did tonight and flag it for your IT team in the morning. Do that, Diana said. He packed his bag, closed his laptop, stood up. He was taller than she'd registered when he was crouched over the floor. He picked up his equipment case and looked at her. For what it's worth, he said, whatever you decide about the letter, I wouldn't make that decision at 1 a.m. after a night like this. And when would you make it? After you've slept, and maybe after you figure out whether you're leaving because you want to go or because you've convinced yourself there's no reason to stay. He shouldered his bag. Those are different problems. Diana said nothing. Cole nodded once, the way you nod at someone when words feel like too much, and nothing at all feels like not enough. Then he walked to the door, swiped his badge, and left. The door sealed behind him with a soft click. Diana sat in the cold, humming room for a long time. The lights on the racks blinked steady and green, all of them, the length of the room, quiet and functional and no longer in crisis. She turned her chair toward the door. Upstairs, on her desk, the resignation letter was still open. She went back to her office, sat in front of the screen, read the 3 sentences one more time. Then she closed the document without saving it. She didn't know yet what that meant. She wasn't making a decision. Not really. She was just buying herself until morning, the way he'd said. Just choosing not to choose at 1 a.m. in a cold server room after the strangest conversation she'd had in over a year. She turned off her desk lamp. The city was still out there, still moving, 31 floors down. Still indifferent. But somehow, in a way she couldn't have explained to anyone, it looked slightly less like something she was trapped behind and slightly more like something she was still part of. She didn't know the name of the feeling yet. She just sat with it in the dark, for a while, before finally going home. She didn't delete the letter that night. She just closed it without saving, which wasn't the same thing, and she understood the difference even if she didn't want to look at it too closely. The drive home took 20 minutes. Her driver, a quiet man named Gerald, who had been with her since before the accident and had learned not to fill silences with conversation, pulled up to her building without a word. He helped with the ramp the way he always did, and she thanked him the way she always did, and the exchange was efficient and dignified and completely hollow in the way that every assisted moment still managed to feel, 14 months in, no matter how many times she told herself she was past it. Her apartment was on the 8th floor. Wide doorways, open floor plan, a bathroom she'd had gutted and rebuilt before she came home from rehab. Everything functional, everything designed around what she could and couldn't do now. When she'd first moved back in, she had stood in the middle of the living room. She could still stand briefly with the right support, a fact she held on to with both hands, and looked at all the careful, practical accommodations and felt something close to grief. Not for what she'd lost exactly. For the person who had lived here before and hadn't known yet what was coming. She didn't feel that anymore most nights. Most nights it was just an apartment. Tonight she felt it again, a little. She poured 2 inches of water into a glass, drank it at the kitchen counter, and thought about what Cole Bennett had said. Not the part about the servers. The other part. Whether you're leaving because you want to go or because you've convinced yourself there's no reason to stay. She went to bed at 2:15 a.m. and lay there for a while in the dark before her body finally gave up on the night. She was back in the office by 8. Marcus, her assistant, was already at his desk, which was not unusual. He was 26 and deeply organized and ran her calendar with the specific, anxious precision of someone who understood that his competence was the primary thing standing between Diana Frost and total schedule collapse. He handed her a coffee and a printed summary of her morning without being asked, because he always did that, and Diana accepted both without breaking stride toward her office. She did not look at the resignation letter. She sat through a 9 o'clock call with their West Coast sales team and said the right things. She responded to the audit report from their compliance team with annotated comments. She ate half a sandwich at her desk at noon and answered 14 emails while doing it, which was not a habit she was proud of. At 2:30, she got a message through the internal ticketing system. Rack 7 incident documentation attached. Recommend 3-point configuration change to prevent recurrence. Happy to walk your IT team through it or implement directly. Your call. Bennett C/DataBridge Solutions. Diana opened the attachment. It was thorough, more thorough than she would have expected from someone submitting a standard contractor report. He'd included not just what had failed and how he'd fixed it, but a full diagnostic of the conditions that created the vulnerability, the monitoring gap, the aging firmware on 2 adjacent racks, the projected timeline for when the problem would have become unrecoverable without intervention. He'd written it clearly, without jargon where plain language worked better, and he'd listed his 3 recommendations in order of urgency with honest cost estimates attached to each one. She read it twice. Then she forwarded it to her CTO with a note. Implement all 3. Have Bennett walk your team through it in person. I want him involved in the follow-up. She sent it before she had time to ask herself too carefully why that last part felt important. None. The walkthrough happened 2 days later in the 4th-floor conference room that the engineering team used for technical reviews. Diana had not planned to attend. She had a board prep meeting at the same time, a thing she had rescheduled twice already and could not reasonably move again. She moved it again. She didn't examine the decision closely. The conference room held 8 people from the IT department, Cole at the front with his laptop projected on the wall, and Diana near the door in a position that she told herself was observational. Cole worked through the technical material without condescension and without the specific brand of performative patience some people deployed when explaining technical content to a mixed audience. He read the room well, slowing down where the questions were clustering, moving faster through the sections where people were clearly tracking, asking the engineers directly what they were seeing, rather than assuming he knew better than they did what was confusing. When someone pushed back, and one of the senior engineers, a woman named Priya, who had been at Frost Industries longer than Diana had, pushed back hard on the second recommendation, calling it redundant and expensive. Cole didn't get defensive. He pulled up his data, walked through his reasoning, and then said, flatly and without drama, "You might be right. I'd want to run the numbers on your alternative before I'd say for sure. Can you share your model?" Priya looked slightly surprised. Most contractors, in Diana's experience, either caved immediately when challenged or dug in on principle. Cole did neither. He just treated the objection like information. Diana watched that exchange and thought about the night before last and the cold server room and the way he'd talked to her when she said she was tired. After the meeting, she caught him in the hallway. "Good session," she said. Cole glanced at her. He was carrying his laptop under one arm and a half-empty coffee cup in the other hand. "Priya's right about the second recommendation, probably. Her approach is cleaner. I'll revise the doc." "I know she's right," Diana said. "That's not why I stopped you." He waited. "I wanted to know how you're settling in," she said. "At Frost." He looked at her like he was deciding something. "I'm a temporary contractor," he said. "I'm not really settling in." "You know what I mean?" "It's fine," he said. "Good team. Priya's a pain in the ass in the best possible way. The systems are messier than they should be, but that's usually how it is." He paused. "You don't usually check in on contractors." "I don't usually have contractors show up in my server room at midnight," she said. Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. The sketch of one. "Fair enough," he said. She wanted to say something else. She wasn't sure what. She had spent years in a position where she was always the one with more information, more leverage, more clarity about what a situation was and where it was going. Standing in a hallway not knowing what she was trying to say felt strange in a way she didn't entirely dislike. "There's an infrastructure review meeting next week," she said. "Full team. I'd like you in the room." "I'm a temp." "I'm aware of your employment status, Cole." He looked at her for a moment. "Okay," he said. She nodded once, turned her chair, and went back to her afternoon. But the infrastructure meeting led to a second meeting, and the second meeting led to a project, and the project led, without any formal decision being made, to Cole Bennett becoming a fixture on the fourth floor. His contract with Databridge was extended twice in the space of 6 weeks. He attended the Tuesday technical reviews, contributed to the quarterly roadmap, and had what appeared to be a standing argument with Priya about server architecture that both of them seemed to enjoy in the way people enjoyed arguments they were having with someone they respected. Diana noticed all of this the way she noticed most things, from a distance, through the lens of reports and updates and secondhand information. She ran a company. She didn't spend her days on the fourth floor, but she started taking a different route through the building some mornings, a longer way around that brought her past the engineering bullpen before she settled into her office. She told herself it was because she was trying to be more visible as a leader, which was true, and also not entirely the reason. It was on one of these mornings, a Tuesday in October, that she found Cole in the small kitchen near the elevator bay, standing at the counter with a phone pressed to his ear and an expression on his face she hadn't seen before. Not the focused steadiness he wore at work. Something tighter, something that had gotten through whatever he usually kept up between himself and the rest of the world. She almost reversed and gave him privacy. She would have, she told herself later. But the kitchen was a through route to the elevator, and she needed the elevator. And by the time she'd registered that the look on his face was private, he'd already seen her. He held up one finger, 1 second, and said into the phone, "I'll be there by 5:30, okay? Tell her I'll be there." "Yes." "Tell her I said stop worrying." A pause. "I know, Mom, I know. I'll be there." He ended the call, set the phone on the counter, looked at it for a second. "Sorry," he said. "You don't need to apologize to me," Diana said. "Everything okay?" "My daughter had a rough day at school." He picked up his coffee cup. "She's 7. They're all rough days sometimes." Diana hadn't known he had a daughter. She hadn't known anything about his life outside the building, which was, she recognized, entirely normal. They were not friends. They were not anything except a CEO and a contractor who had an unusual introduction. But the information landed with a small, specific weight. "Is she all right?" Diana said. "She will be." He said it the way parents said things like that, with confidence that had work behind it, not assumption. "She had a thing with some kids at recess, social stuff. She's sensitive." He paused. "She picks up on things more than other kids do. It makes her easy to hurt." "Sounds like she has a good father looking out for her," Diana said. Cole gave a short, quiet exhale that wasn't quite a laugh. "I'm trying," he said. "Some days I have no idea what I'm doing." She looked at him. In the fluorescent light of the office kitchen, with a phone call he hadn't planned on and a daughter who was having a bad day 40 minutes away, he looked like a person instead of a competent professional. The circles under his eyes were the same as always, but she understood them better now. "2 kids? Or just the one?" she said. He looked up. 2. Lena's 7, Owen's 9. He said their names with that slight shift in register that she'd noticed parents always did. The way the name of your child lived differently in your mouth than any other word. "That's a lot to carry," she said. "It's a lot to have," he said, and meant something different by it. Diana thought about that distinction for the rest of the morning. She started asking him things. Not all at once, and not in any way that she would have described as deliberate, but looking back she could see the pattern clearly enough. Tuesday mornings, kitchen, 5 to 10 minutes before the world required them both elsewhere. She learned that his son Owen played soccer with the specific intensity of a child who had decided something mattered and wasn't going to do it halfway. She learned that Lena drew constantly, on anything available, had filled 3 sketchbooks in the past month, and had recently begun leaving small drawings in Cole's work bag, which he found when he was looking for his badge or a charging cable, and kept every single one of them in a folder in his glove compartment. She learned that he'd been a single parent for 3 years. She learned that the arrangement was not something he volunteered details about, and she didn't push, because she understood something about not wanting to give the full story to someone who might use it to explain you. She did not learn very much about his former wife. She picked up, in pieces, that she was gone, and had been for long enough that the children's baseline was Cole. Just Cole, Dad, and whatever woman at his mother's house came second in their daily architecture. But Cole's silences on the subject were not the silences of a man in ongoing pain. They were the silences of someone who had processed something difficult and arrived at a place on the other side of it that wasn't peace exactly, but was functional, was forward. She recognized that place. She had been trying to get there herself. The afternoon everything shifted was a Thursday in November. Diana's 4 p.m. had canceled. She had 45 minutes that belonged to no one, which was rare enough that she didn't know immediately what to do with them. She ended up on the 4th floor. There was a systems review she'd been meaning to read, and her office felt oppressive, and found Cole at his workstation with what appeared to be a child's drawing spread across part of his desk, covered by a stack of printouts he was pretending wasn't covering it. He noticed her noticing. "Lena brought it to drop off this morning," he said, moving the printouts without being asked. "I was going to put it away." The drawing was in black marker on printer paper. 2 figures, one tall and stick-limbed, one much smaller, holding hands. Both had round faces with circular dots for eyes and curved lines for mouths. The tall figure had something beneath it that might have been wheels, or clouds, or scribbled energy, the kind of detail that was clear to the child who drew it and unreadable to everyone else. "Is the tall one supposed to be you?" Diana said. "No," Cole said. "That's you." Diana looked at the drawing. "She's never met me," she said. "I know." He paused. "I may have mentioned you, to the kids, casually. Owen asked if you were my boss, and I said kind of technically, and Lena asked if you were nice, and I said I thought so." He stopped. "She asked if you had a wheelchair, and I said yes, so she drew it." Diana looked at the small, round face on the tall figure, the big curved smile. The lines beneath that were apparently a wheelchair, drawn by a 7-year-old who had decided they needed to include it, because it was part of who the person was, and that was just a thing in the world, a feature like height or hair. She felt something. She didn't try to name it right away. "She sounds like an interesting kid," Diana said. "She's a lot," Cole said, and smiled when he said it, and the smile was the realest thing she'd seen on his face. 2 weeks later, he asked her if she wanted to get coffee. Not in the kitchen, not a Tuesday morning before the building required them. Coffee. Off-site. The small Italian place 2 blocks over that, a lot of people from the building used for meetings they didn't want on the calendar. Diana said yes before she'd considered whether she should. They sat across from each other in a booth. He'd chosen it because the table was the right height, she realized, and hadn't made a thing of it. And they talked for an hour and a half. Not about the company, about other things. He told her about growing up in Ohio, the second of 3 brothers, a father who fixed appliances for a living and had strong opinions about doing things correctly the first time or not at all. She told him about her mother, who was still alive and in Denver and called every Sunday and still managed to say at least one thing per call that made Diana want to scream, and how she missed her anyway, constantly, in a low-grade way she hadn't quite figured out what to do with. "Have you been to Denver since the accident?" Cole asked. "Once," Diana said. "It was not great." "The visit or the travel?" "Both. My mother is very loving in a way that makes you feel slightly surveilled." She looked at her coffee. "She kept looking at me like she was waiting for me to break. The whole trip. Every time I moved, she'd start to get up." She paused. "I know she meant well." "Meaning well doesn't always help," he said. "No," Diana agreed. "It doesn't." He was quiet for a moment, then, "Does it bother you? When people do that?" "Do what?" "Watch you. Wait for something to be hard." She considered the question seriously, the way he'd asked it seriously. "It used to make me furious," she said. "Now it just makes me tired. The fury took too much energy, and I stopped having extra." She looked at him. "You don't do it." "I'm aware." "How come?" He turned his coffee cup on the table, once. "Because I've had people do it to me," he said. After things got hard at home. People would ask how I was doing with this specific face, like they were braced for impact. He met her eyes. It's worse than being ignored. She nodded slowly. It makes you feel like a problem someone's trying to manage, she said. Yeah, he said. Exactly that. They sat with that for a moment, the specific quiet that settles between two people who have just recognized something in each other without making too large a deal of it. Thank you, Diana said, for not doing that. You don't have to thank me for treating you like a person. I know I don't, she said. I'm doing it anyway. He looked at her for a moment. Something moved through his expression, something she didn't quite have the language for. Not quite warmth, not quite something else. Something that was still finding its shape. I'm glad I came in that night, he said. The server room. You were already there, she said. I was, he said, but I'm still glad. December came with the particular coldness of a city that didn't apologize for its winters. The trees along the avenue outside Frost Industries had lost their leaves weeks ago and stood bare and skeletal against a sky that couldn't decide between gray and white. Diana had not written another resignation letter. She had done the thing Cole had said, the night of the server room, and figured out the difference between wanting to leave and having convinced herself there was no reason to stay. And what she'd found, in the weeks that followed, was that the wanting to leave part was mostly fear, and the no reason to stay part had started, quietly and without her exactly planning it, to be less true. She had brought in a new operations lead and actually given him authority instead of approving every decision through her office. She had started a standing weekly call with department heads that she ran not as a reporting session, but as an open floor, which Priya had described in a team meeting as disorienting at first and then sort of great. She had called her mother back after a Sunday that had ended badly and said the things she'd been not saying. I need you to stop waiting for me to fall apart. I'm not going to. Her mother had cried, which Diana had expected. Then her mother had said quietly, I know, sweetheart. I know you're not, which Diana had not expected, and which had sat with her for days afterward in a way she was still working through. She was rebuilding, in other words. Not smoothly, not without setbacks. There was a board meeting in December where she lost her temper in a way she regretted, and a week where the phantom pain in her legs came back bad enough that she had 3 nights of real sleep deprivation, and a morning where she sat in her car in the parking garage for 11 minutes before she could make herself go in. But she was rebuilding, and part of why she was rebuilding, a part she would not have been able to name precisely, but which was real and which she had stopped pretending wasn't, was that she had started to have mornings she looked forward to, and Tuesday kitchen conversations with a man who kept his daughter's drawings in his glove compartment, and the coffee place 2 blocks over, and the knowledge, which was new and fragile and significant, that someone knew the truth of where she'd been the night they met and hadn't treated her differently for it. She was pulling into the parking garage one evening, late, when her phone lit up. Cole's name on the screen. She answered before the second ring. Hey, he said. Are you still at the building? Just got in. Why? I need to ask you something, he said, and I want to ask it in person. A pause. Is that okay? Diana looked at the concrete wall of the parking garage, a strip of fluorescent light overhead, her breath just faintly visible in the cold air. Which entrance? She said. Main lobby, he said. 5 minutes. She sat for a moment after the call ended. She didn't know what he wanted to ask. She had some ideas, and the ideas made her chest do something uncomfortable that she recognized after a moment's examination as something closer to hope than fear, which was not a thing she'd felt in a long time and which she was not entirely sure she knew what to do with. She started toward the lobby. Outside, the city moved in its indifferent way, but she was part of it tonight, fully and without qualification. A woman going to meet someone in a lobby because he had something to ask her and she wanted to hear it. She pushed through the doors. He was already there. He was standing near the security desk with his jacket still on, which meant he'd come from outside, not from upstairs. His hands were in his pockets, and he was looking at the floor when she came through the lobby doors, and he looked up when he heard her. And for a half-second before he arranged his face into something more neutral, she caught the expression underneath. Something unguarded and a little uncertain, which was not a thing she associated with Cole Bennett, and the sight of it did something to her equilibrium. Hey, he said. Hey, she said. You sounded serious on the phone. I'm always serious. You sounded more serious than usual." He exhaled through his nose. The lobby was empty except for the overnight security guard, who had the professional disinterest of someone paid specifically not to notice things. Cole looked at the guard briefly, then back at Diana. "Can we—" He gestured toward the seating area near the windows, the cluster of chairs and a low table that nobody ever used except people waiting for rides. They went there. Diana pulled up beside one of the chairs, and Cole sat down, leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, and looked at his hands for a moment. "Owen has a soccer tournament Saturday morning," he said. "It's a big deal for him. Regional qualifier. He's been talking about it for 6 weeks." He paused. "I told my mother she could come, but she has a thing. My uncle's birthday. It got moved, and she's the one who planned it. She can't not go." Another pause. "I usually have backup. This time, I don't have backup." Diana waited. "Lena's going to be at the tournament, but she's going to be bored out of her mind by halftime," Cole said. "She doesn't really follow soccer. She comes for Owen, and because she likes the snacks, that's Lena, that's just how she is. But she gets restless, and when she gets restless, she needs something to do with her hands, and I'm usually the one who handles that, but I'm going to be watching Owen, and I can't—" He stopped, pressed his lips together. "I realize this is a strange thing to ask." "You haven't asked it yet," Diana said. He looked at her. "Would you come?" "To the tournament, and sit with Lena while I watch Owen play." The lobby was quiet. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city moved in its distant, lit-up way. Diana looked at Cole, at the slight tension around his eyes, the way he'd asked it directly, without preamble or softening, the way he was waiting for her answer without trying to manage what it might be. "Yes," she said. He blinked. He had not expected that to be easy. She could see it. "You don't have to be—" "Cole," she said. "I said yes." He sat back. Some of the tension went out of his shoulders. "Okay," he said. "Okay, it starts at 9. I can pick you up at 8:15 if—" "I'll drive myself," she said. "Send me the address." He nodded, then something moved across his face. Relief and something warmer underneath it, something he wasn't naming and she wasn't going to name for him. "She's going to have a lot of questions," he said. "Lena, she asks a lot of questions." "I answer a lot of questions," Diana said. He almost smiled. "Don't say I didn't warn you." The soccer complex was 40 minutes outside the city, a sprawling facility with 6 fields and a parking situation that was aggressive even by weekend sports standards. Diana arrived at 8:50, having left 20 minutes earlier than necessary because she'd learned in the last 14 months that new places sometimes required reconnaissance. She sat in her car for a few minutes, identifying the best entry point, calculating the surface. The paths looked paved and mostly level, which was good, but there was a section near the main entrance that looked like it might have a lip. She texted Cole. "Here." "Which field?" He responded in 30 seconds. "Field 3, east side. I'll come find you." She was almost to the east entrance when she heard Owen before she saw him. A 9-year-old's voice carrying the specific pitch of pre-game nerves translated into pure physical movement. He was jogging in place near the sideline in a red jersey with the number 7 on the back, talking to a teammate with the rapid, compressed energy of a kid who had been awake since 6 a.m. because today was the day. Cole was standing a few feet away, watching his son with the expression of a parent watching a child want something badly. Not quite hope, not quite dread. The combination of both that made your chest feel full and precarious at the same time. Beside him, sitting on a folding chair with a sketchbook open on her lap, was a small girl with dark hair in 2 uneven braids that suggested Cole had done them himself this morning. She looked up when Diana approached, and her eyes went wide. Not startled, not uncertain, just wide open in the way children's eyes went when something interesting happened. "Are you Diana?" she said. "I am," Diana said. "I drew you," Lena said with great confidence. "Dad said you'd look different in real life, and I said I thought I got it pretty good." "I saw the drawing," Diana said. "You got it pretty good." Lena studied her with the frank, unself-conscious attention of a child who had not yet learned that staring was considered impolite. Her gaze moved to the wheelchair with the same uncomplicated interest she'd have given a bicycle or a go-kart. Curious, not troubled. "Does it go fast?" she said. "Faster than you'd think," Diana said. Lena considered this. "Can I ride it sometime?" "Lena," Cole said. "What? I'm just asking." "It's fine," Diana said. She looked at Lena. "Maybe sometime." Lena accepted this with the equanimity of a child who understood maybe as a real answer rather than a soft no, and returned to her sketchbook. Cole caught Diana's eye over the top of Lena's head and did something with his expression that was part apology and part something else. Gratitude, maybe, or recognition. "She's exactly what you described," Diana said quietly. "Yeah," he said. "She really is." Owen's team won the first match 3-1, a result that Owen took with the intensity of someone who was already thinking about the second match and what needed to be better. Cole watched from the sideline with his arms crossed and his jaw tight, calling out occasionally, "Good pressure, 7, stay with it," in a voice that was controlled and focused in a way that bore a clear family resemblance to how he sounded in a server room at midnight. Diana sat with Lena. This was, she discovered, an absorbing occupation. Lena talked the way some children drew, continuously, with one idea layering over the next before the first was finished, following a logic that was entirely coherent from the inside. She was drawing the field from her vantage point, and she narrated what she was drawing as she drew it, and she also asked questions, as Cole had predicted, in no particular order and with no apparent concern for topic transitions. "Do you live by yourself?" "I do," Diana said. "Don't you get lonely?" "Sometimes." "Dad gets lonely sometimes. He thinks we don't notice, but Owen and I notice." Lena pressed her marker down harder on the page, giving a stick figure very emphatic hair. "He's better this year, though." Diana said nothing. Lena looked up. "You can say something," Lena said. "I'm not being private about it." "I was going to say that the drawing looks really good," Diana said. "That figure with the hair." Lena examined it critically. "That's supposed to be Owen. His hair is always doing something weird." She added another mark. "Are you and my dad friends?" "Yes," Diana said. "Owen says you might be more than friends." "Owen is 9, Diana said. "He's perceptive," Lena said, with an authority that suggested she used that word specifically because someone had taught it to her and she'd decided to keep it. "Mrs. Albright at school says I'm perceptive too." "What do you think?" Diana said. Lena looked at her for a long moment with those wide, frank eyes. "I think you make him less stressed," she said, "and I think he smiles different when he talks about you." She returned to her drawing. "That's a good thing, in case you were wondering." Diana looked out at the field. Cole was tracking Owen's position, one hand shading his eyes against the pale winter sun. Owen was moving fast, cutting left, calling for the ball. "Thank you for telling me," Diana said. "Sure," said Lena, and added a sun to the top corner of her drawing. After the second match, which Owen's team won by a single goal, in a finish that had Cole on his feet and Lena standing on her chair yelling her brother's name, despite not fully understanding what had happened, they went for food at a diner near the complex that was clearly accustomed to post-tournament crowds. The place was loud and warm and smelled like coffee and pancake syrup, and they had to wait 12 minutes for a table big enough for a wheelchair, which the hostess managed without incident and Cole managed without comment in a way that Diana noted and held on to. Owen ate a quantity of food that Diana found genuinely impressive and narrated the entire second match from memory, in sequence, while doing it. He had Cole's steadiness but expressed it differently, where Cole's steadiness was internal, a quality of how he processed things before speaking. Owen's was kinetic, a precision about physical detail that meant he remembered exactly where everyone had been standing and what the ball had been doing at every moment. "You run like you're angry," Lena told him at one point. "I run like I'm fast," Owen said. "You can be both," Lena said. Owen looked at Diana. "Is she always like this at your work?" "I'm a different kind of always like this," Lena said before Diana could answer. Diana watched Cole watch his children argue, the specific, relaxed alertness of a parent who had learned the difference between the arguments that needed intervention and the arguments that were just how two siblings negotiated the world. He caught her looking and didn't look away. "Thank you for coming," he said. He said it quietly enough that the kids, occupied with their disagreement, didn't register it. "Thank you for asking," she said. His hand was on the table between their coffee cups. He didn't move it toward her, and she didn't move toward it. But it was there, and she was aware of it, and she thought he was aware of her being aware, and for the moment that was enough. January brought a cold that the city handled with its usual grim endurance. Cole's contract had been renewed, formally through proper channels, with a title change that made him effectively the lead on Frost Industries' infrastructure modernization project. It was Priya who submitted the recommendation, which Diana appreciated for the specific cleanness of it. She hadn't had to do it herself, hadn't had to navigate the appearance of favoritism, hadn't had to make a decision that looked like anything other than what it was. The right call, endorsed by the right person for the right reasons. He was in the building every day now. That was different from before. The Tuesday kitchen conversations became other things too. A walk at lunch sometimes, along the avenue outside when the weather allowed, Diana's chair and Cole's long-legged stride finding an unplanned rhythm along the sidewalk. Work conversations that became not work conversations, the seam between them invisible enough that Diana sometimes couldn't have said afterward where one had ended and the other begun. She was aware of what was happening. She wasn't someone who missed things happening to her as a general rule, but she was careful with it in a way she hadn't been careful about much since the accident, handling it like something that could break, going slowly. Not because she lacked confidence, but because she understood, better now than she had at 28, that the things worth having were usually the things that couldn't be rushed. Cole was careful too. She could see it in him, the same deliberateness she felt in herself, and she understood instinctively that it came from the same place, from having had something fall apart and needing to be sure this time that the ground was real before putting weight on it. They were circling something, both of them, and for a while, the circling was enough. The night it shifted was a Wednesday in late January, not special in any external way. They'd had dinner, the two of them, at the Italian place 2 blocks from the office that had started as a business-adjacent lunch spot and had gradually, without anyone declaring it, become theirs. The food was reliable, the lighting was low without being deliberately romantic, and the corner table was accessible without requiring a conversation about it. They'd been there 2 hours. It was the kind of dinner where you look up and realize the restaurant has emptied around you, and you don't know when it happened. Cole was telling her about Owen's most recent obsession, which had shifted from soccer statistics to a documentary series about deep-sea exploration that he'd found on a streaming service and was now watching with an intensity that had led to a 30-minute bedtime conversation about pressure differentials and bioluminescence. Diana was laughing, actually laughing, the kind that arrived before she could curate it, because Cole had recreated Owen's explanation of how anglerfish worked with the precise, serious delivery of a 9-year-old who had recently decided this was important information. He asked me, Cole said, whether the fish felt lonely, down there, in the dark. Diana stopped laughing. "What did you say?" "I said I thought they were used to it." He paused. And then he said that being used to something didn't mean you didn't feel it. He looked at his coffee. 9 years old. "He's going to be something," Diana said. "He already is something." Cole said it quietly, without pride as performance. Just fact. Diana looked at him across the table. The restaurant was almost empty. Outside, through the window, the street was wet from rain that had stopped an hour ago. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You usually just ask," he said. "You don't usually ask if you can. This one's different." He met her eyes. "Okay." She held his gaze. "Your wife," she said. "What happened?" The table between them was quiet for a moment. He didn't flinch, didn't close up, but she could see him deciding, not deciding whether to trust her, she thought, but deciding where to start. "She left," he said. 3 years ago. Owen was 6, Lena was 4. He turned his coffee cup on its saucer, once. It wasn't one thing. It was a lot of small things for a long time, and then it was one thing, and then she was gone. He paused. She wasn't a bad person. She was someone who needed something she couldn't find in the life we'd built, and she stayed longer than she should have trying to want it. And I think that made it worse for everyone, including her. Do the kids understand that? Diana said. Owen understands that she left and that Dad stayed, Cole said. At 9, that's probably enough. Lena was too young to really remember before. He paused. She asks about her sometimes. Lena does. Not with pain, exactly. More like curiosity. Like her mother is a place she's heard about but never visited. He looked at the window. That's almost harder, in a way. I don't know what to do with absence. I can't make sense for her. Diana thought about the small girl with the sketchbook and the uneven braids and the frank, uncomplicated eyes. You tell her the truth, Diana said, in pieces. As she's ready. I know, he said. I'm trying. A pause. My accident, Diana said. You've never asked me exactly what happened. He looked at her. You'll tell me if you want me to know. I want you to know, she said. She told him, not the press version, not the careful, contained account she'd given to the board, and the public statement and the journalist who'd interviewed her for the profile that ran 6 weeks after she returned to work. The actual version. The one where she'd been driving home from a work dinner at 11 p.m. because she'd stayed too long and been too tired to stay but felt like she couldn't leave. And she'd been on the phone, not texting, phone, pressed to her ear, eyes on the road, but not on the road the way they should have been. When the other car came through the intersection. I wasn't blameless, she said. It was the first time she had said that out loud to another person. The other driver ran a red light, but I was distracted. Both things were true, and for a long time I only let myself think about one of them. Cole listened. He didn't tell her it wasn't her fault. He didn't tell her she was being too hard on herself. He listened, and when she was done, he said, "Thank you for telling me that." And the simplicity of it was, in its way, the most useful thing anyone had said to her about the accident in 14 months. I'm still angry sometimes, she said. Not at anything specific, just angry. I wake up angry some mornings and there's nowhere to put it. I know that kind, he said. What do you do with it? I usually go for a run, he said, which I recognize is, don't apologize, she said. I wasn't going to, he said. I was going to say it's not a solution. It's just where the anger goes while I figure out the actual problem. She looked at him. What's the actual problem usually? He thought about it seriously. Usually that I'm scared of something I haven't admitted to being scared of yet. The restaurant was quiet. Somewhere in the kitchen, someone was washing dishes. The overhead light cast everything in a warm, even glow. Are you scared right now? Diana said. Cole looked at her for a long moment. Yeah, he said. A little. Me too, she said. Neither of them said anything else for a moment. Outside, a cab went by, headlights sweeping briefly across the window. Diana felt her heart doing something uncomfortable and specific and familiar from a long time ago, before the accident and the rehabilitation and the 14 months of building something different from what she'd planned to be. Cole, she said. I know, he said. I haven't finished. I know, he said again, and this time his voice was different, quieter, more careful, certain in the way that real certainty was careful rather than loud. Diana, I know. She held his gaze. He held hers back. No performance, no management, just two people at a table in an emptying restaurant who had arrived somewhere they'd been moving toward for months and were deciding, without saying the decision out loud, not to go back. His hand moved across the table. She put hers in it. His fingers closed around hers, not tight, not dramatic, just steady, the way he did everything. The particular steadiness that was not about being unafraid, but about not letting fear make the decisions. They stayed like that for a while. The dishwasher ran in the kitchen. The street outside was wet and lit and moving. What came after that night was not a sequence of romantic gestures. It was more ordinary than that, and better for being ordinary. It was a standing Tuesday that shifted from the kitchen to lunch off-site. It was Lana. On the second Saturday, Diana came to the house, climbing onto the arm of the couch next to Diana's chair and announcing she was going to show Diana all 3 of her sketchbooks from the beginning, in order, which took an hour and 20 minutes, and was one of the more complete experiences Diana had had in recent memory. It was Owen, gradually, stopping treating Diana like a guest and starting treating her like someone who was going to keep being there, asking her questions about her work with the same focused interest he brought to anglerfish and pressure differentials, and listening to the answers with his father's particular quality of attention. It was Diana's mother calling on a Sunday in February, and Diana saying, after the usual 10 minutes, "Mom, I'm seeing someone," and her mother going very still on the other end of the line before saying carefully, "Tell me about him," and Diana telling her, and her mother listening, and neither of them crying, which was new and felt like something. It was Cole. One evening in March when they were at his apartment after dinner and the kids were in bed, sitting on the couch next to where Diana had positioned her chair, and saying without preamble, "I want to be honest with you about something." "Okay," she said. "I've been thinking about what this looks like," he said. "From outside. A CEO and a contractor. The power thing." "I've thought about it too," she said. "I don't want you to feel like—" "Cole," she said, "I own a company. I'm the one with every structural advantage in this situation. If I were feeling pressured, I would have told you by now, and you would have stopped immediately, and we both know that." She looked at him. "Is that actually what you're worried about?" He was quiet for a moment. "No," he said. "Not really." "What are you actually worried about?" He looked at his hands. "That this is going to be good," he said, "and then something's going to happen to it, and the kids are already—" He stopped. "Owen doesn't say things. He just gets attached. He's been attached for 2 months, and if something—" "I know," Diana said. "I'm not saying it's your fault if something—" "Cole." She reached over and put her hand on his arm. He looked at it, then at her. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "I'm not someone who disappears. That's not who I am." "I know that," he said, "logically. But I haven't— It's been a long time since I trusted that about someone," he said, "and I'm working on it. I'm not there yet." She looked at him, at the circles under his eyes that were slightly less dark than they'd been in October, at the man who had worked in her server room at midnight and told her the difference between wanting to leave and convincing yourself there was nothing to stay for. "Take your time," she said. "I'm not going anywhere." He exhaled, the particular exhale of someone who has been holding something and has decided, not without effort, to let it go for now. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. Somewhere down the hall, Lena made a small sound in her sleep. Both of them listened for a second. Silence resumed. Cole's shoulder was close to hers. The apartment was warm. Outside, the March wind did what March wind did, and neither of them moved, and the evening went on in its quiet, unspectacular way, which was, Diana was beginning to understand, exactly what she had been missing without knowing it. Not spectacle, not proof, just presence, steady and ordinary and real. The call came on a Thursday morning in April, while Cole was in the middle of a server migration and Diana was back-to-back in budget reviews and the kids were at school doing the ordinary things kids did on Thursday mornings in April, which was the last time any of them would describe their lives as ordinary for a while. Cole saw the number and didn't recognize it. He let it go to voicemail, the way he did with unknown numbers during work hours, and finished the command he was running and then pulled up the voicemail because something about the area code nagged at him. Not local, not a vendor he recognized, not his mother's number or the school's number, which were the two unknown numbers he genuinely feared. He listened to the message once. Then he sat very still at his workstation for approximately 30 seconds. Then he called Diana. She picked up on the second ring, which meant she was between meetings. "Hey, everything okay?" "No," he said, and the flatness of it, no preamble, no softening, told her immediately that this was not a small no. She moved to her office and closed the door. "Talk to me." "Rachel called," he said. Diana had heard the name exactly once, in the same way she'd heard other pieces of Cole's past, in fragments, carefully placed, never the full architecture. Rachel was the name she'd filed away without pressing on, the way you noted a door in a house you were still learning. She knew enough. Rachel had left 3 years ago. Rachel was Owen and Lena's mother. Rachel was gone. Apparently, Rachel was not as gone as Cole had believed. "What did she say, Bung?" Diana said. "She wants to talk." His voice was even, controlled in the specific way things were controlled when the alternative was not being controlled. She says she's been back in the state for 2 months. She says she's been getting her life together, is how she put it. She wants to see the kids. The office was quiet. Diana could hear the faint ambient sound of the building through the window, traffic 31 floors down. "Are you going to call her back?" Diana said. "I don't know yet," he said. "I needed to tell someone first." She understood what he meant by that. Not I needed advice, not I needed someone to tell me what to do. Just the thing had happened, and he needed it to exist in someone else's ears before he decided how to carry it. "I'm here," she said. "Whatever you need." He exhaled. "I'll call you after I talk to her." He called Rachel that evening from his car in the parking garage of his apartment building, which was a choice Diana understood when he told her later, somewhere contained, somewhere he could leave when he needed to, somewhere the kids couldn't overhear through thin walls. The conversation lasted 41 minutes. He told Diana about it afterward in pieces, over the phone, while she sat in her apartment with a cup of tea going cold on the table beside her. Rachel was sober, Cole said, had been for 14 months. He noted the number with a flatness that meant something, though Diana didn't say so. She was seeing a therapist. She had a job. She was living in an apartment 20 minutes from the city. She told Cole, been building toward this moment for the better part of a year, and she understood if he was angry, and she understood if the kids didn't want to see her, and she wasn't going to push, but she needed to ask. "What did you say?" Diana asked. "I said I needed time to think," Cole said, "and that any decision would involve the kids, and that I wasn't going to put them in a room with someone who was going to disappear again." He paused. She said she understood. "Do you believe her?" Diana said. A long silence. "I believe she means it right now," he said. "I don't know what I believe about the rest of it." Diana thought about Lena, who had drawn a woman she'd never met into a sketchbook picture because her dad had mentioned her, and Owen, who didn't say things but got attached, and the particular danger of reintroducing something into two children's lives that had already left once. "What are you going to do?" she said. "I'm going to talk to their therapist first," he said. "Dr. Amara? She's been seeing Owen for a year, Lena for 6 months. She knows them. She'll know how to frame it." Diana hadn't known the kids were in therapy. She absorbed that quietly, noted the trust it represented that he was telling her now, and didn't make it more than it was. "That sounds right," she said. "Yeah." He was quiet for a moment. "Diana." "I know," she said. This doesn't change anything. With us. I just want to be clear about that." "I know that too," she said. "Stop worrying about me and worry about your kids. That's the right order." He was quiet in a way that felt like something settling. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. "Call me tomorrow." Dr. Amara was a small, direct woman in her late 40s who had the quality of someone who had heard a great deal of difficult things and had decided that the most useful response to difficult things was honesty delivered without brutality. Cole had liked her from the first session. She didn't perform warmth. She just had it, quietly, underneath the directness. She saw Cole alone first, on a Monday, before he'd said anything to the kids. He told her about Rachel's call, and she listened without interrupting, which he appreciated, and when he finished, she asked him 3 questions. What did he want the outcome to be for the children? What did he fear most? And what was he most afraid of wanting? The third question was the one that caught him. He sat with it for a moment. "I'm afraid of wanting her to fail," he said. "Rachel. I'm afraid that part of me wants her to come back and be inconsistent again, so the kids see it and make their own choice, and I never have to be the one who Siga." He stopped. "The one who what?" Dr. Amara said. "The one who decided," Cole said. "The one who made the call about what was good for them and got it wrong." Dr. Amara nodded slowly. "That's honest," she said. "It's not a good thing to want." "No," she agreed. "But it's a human thing. You've spent 3 years being the one who stayed. It would be strange if part of you didn't resent being the one who has to make room now." He looked at his hands. How do I tell them? Age appropriate, honest, and without editorializing, she said. Owen is old enough to have complicated feelings and young enough to need you to name them for him. Lena will follow Owen's lead more than she'll follow yours, so Owen is your first conversation. She paused. And Cole, when you talk to Owen, he's going to look at your face. He's going to read it before he processes the words. Make sure your face is saying what you actually want him to hear. He told Owen on a Tuesday night after dinner. Lena was at a neighbor's for a play date. Cole had arranged it specifically, which Owen would understand when he was older and probably already suspected now. They sat at the kitchen table. Owen had a glass of milk and was pulling at the label on it the way he did when he knew something was coming. Your mom called me, Cole said. Owen went very still. She's been living nearby for a couple months, Cole said. She's doing better than she was. She'd like to see you and your sister, if you're open to it. He paused. You don't have to be open to it. This is your choice. Owen looked at the milk glass. Is she different? She says she's working on it, Cole said. I believe she's trying. That's not the same as different. Cole looked at his son. 9 years old, and he'd just said the most precise thing that could be said about the situation, the thing that Cole had been circling for a week without landing on as cleanly. No, Cole said. It's not the same. Owen was quiet for a long time. He wasn't a child who filled silences with noise. What does Diana think? He said. Cole hadn't expected that. Why? Because she's been around for a while and she doesn't say stuff she doesn't mean, Owen said, with the matter-of-fact authority of a child explaining something he considered obvious. So I want to know what she thinks. Cole thought about calling Diana right there, showing Owen the phone, letting him ask her himself. He didn't. Not because he thought it was the wrong instinct, but because he thought Owen needed to sit with not knowing for a minute. She thinks we should take it slowly, Cole said. She thinks you and Lena matter most in this decision. Owen processed that. Then, okay, he said. I'll think about it. Take your time, Cole said. Owen picked up his milk. Is Lena going to be scared? She might be confused, Cole said. You could help with that, if you want. Owen considered this responsibility with the seriousness he gave to important things. Okay, he said again. Cole reached across the table and put his hand briefly on Owen's shoulder. Not a long moment, not emotional in any performed way. Just contact, just, I'm here in the language they'd developed over 3 years of it being the two of them first, before Lena really remembered, before anything else. Owen didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Ishanten. The meeting between the children and Rachel was arranged for a Saturday afternoon in May, at a neutral location, a park that the kids didn't associate with anything particular, in the presence of Dr. Amara, who had suggested this format and whom Cole trusted enough not to second-guess. Rachel had agreed to everything without resistance, which Cole noted and tried not to read too deeply. Diana offered to stay away. She said it the week before, plainly. I can make myself scarce Saturday, whatever you need. And Cole had looked at her and said, I don't want you to make yourself scarce. And that had been the end of that conversation. She didn't go to the park. That was Cole's territory, his children's moment, and she understood the difference between being present in someone's life and inserting yourself into something that needed to be theirs. But Cole texted her when they arrived and texted her when they left, and she sat in her apartment with her phone on the table and did not pretend that she wasn't aware of every hour of that afternoon. She got the call at 4:45 p.m. How was it? She said. Strange, he said. He sounded tired in the specific way you sounded when you'd spent 3 hours being very careful and the carefulness had cost you something. She was good, actually. She didn't push. She let the kids lead. Lena showed her one of her drawings, which I did not expect, and Rachel, he paused, she held it like it was something, like it mattered. What did Owen do? He was polite, correct. He answered her questions and didn't ask any of his own. A pause. Dr. Amara said that's actually a healthy response for his age. He's not ready to want anything from her yet. That sounds right, Diana said. Yeah. A long breath. She wants to do it again, Rachel, in 2 weeks, Same format. He paused. I said I'd think about it. Are you going to say yes? Probably, he said. But I want to talk to the kids first. Diana could hear the sounds of the apartment in the background. A cartoon, she thought, and Lena's voice, and the specific rustling of a house resettling into its normal rhythms after an abnormal day. Cole, she said. Yeah. You're doing this right, she said. I want you to know that. He was quiet for a moment. I don't always feel like I know what right looks like. I know, she said. You're doing it anyway. That's the part that counts. Chet. The visits continued through May and into June, always structured, always with Dr. Amara or a clear agreed-upon framework. Rachel was consistent, present, on time, not pushing for more than she'd been given, not making promises she couldn't audit. Cole had a lawyer friend review the informal arrangement and give him a read on where things stood legally, which was nowhere yet. There was no formal custody agreement, had never been one, because Rachel had simply left and hadn't contested anything. That changed in July. Cole came into Diana's office on a Monday morning with an expression she had learned to read by now. Not the focused steadiness of a man with a problem in front of him, but the particular closed-down quality of someone carrying something they haven't figured out how to put down yet. She filed, he said. Diana looked up. What? Rachel, she filed a petition, formal custody request, joint physical custody, alternating weeks. He held the legal document in his hand like he hadn't decided yet whether to put it on her desk or take it back. Her lawyer filed Friday afternoon. I got it this morning. Diana was very still. Sit down, she said. He sat. He put the document on her desk between them and looked at it the way you looked at a thing that was going to cost you. She said she wasn't going to push, he said. 4 meetings in, with my kids, who she didn't see for 3 years, and she filed for joint custody. Did you call your lawyer? I have an appointment at 2. Good. Diana looked at the document. Have you talked to Dr. Amara? Left her a message. Okay. Diana looked at him. His jaw was set. His hands were flat on his thighs. Very still. The stillness of someone suppressing something physical. What are you feeling right now? I'm angry, he said. I'm trying not to be in a way that clouds my thinking, but I'm angry. You're allowed to be angry, she said. It doesn't help. Sometimes it doesn't have to help, she said. Sometimes it's just accurate. He looked at her. Something in his face shifted. Not much, but enough. What would you do? He said. If it were your company, if someone came back after 3 years and said they wanted half of what you'd built alone. Diana thought about it seriously, the way he'd asked it seriously. I'd protect it, she said. Legally, fully, and without apologizing for protecting it, and I'd document everything I'd done to keep it running while they were gone. She paused. But I'd also remember that the kids aren't a company, and that they're the ones who'll carry whatever happens in court for the rest of their lives. Cole looked at the document. I'm not going to let her have alternating weeks, he said. They're in school. They have routines. Owen has his therapist and his soccer team, and Lena has her art class on Saturdays, and they have a life that I built with them, and she doesn't get to walk in after 3 years and take half of it because she filed paperwork. Then you fight it, Diana said, and I'll be there. He looked at her. Diana, don't, she said. Don't tell me it might get complicated for me publicly. Don't tell me it could affect how the board sees my personal life. I know all of that. She held his gaze. I'm telling you, I'll be there. He was quiet for a long moment. People are going to have opinions, he said. About you. About this. You're a CEO in a custody case that's going to be in front of a family court judge and probably in front of a reporter somewhere if someone decides it's interesting. Let them, she said. That's easy to say. I know it is, she said. I'm saying it anyway. He looked at her the way he'd looked at her in the lobby in December. That night he'd called her to ask something important, and she'd come down without needing to know what it was first. Like she was something he still hadn't entirely reconciled himself to being grateful for. Thank you, he said. Stop thanking me, she said. Go to your lawyer appointment. Chotit. The legal process was slow and expensive and psychologically corrosive in the way that legal processes always were, grinding down the people inside them with its procedural insistence on translating human pain into filings and response deadlines and discovery requests. Cole's lawyer was a blunt woman named Karen Shields, who had been practicing family law for 20 years and had the specific, exhausted competence of someone who had seen every version of this situation and had learned to be useful rather than reassuring. "She has a case," Karen told Cole in their second meeting with Diana present at Cole's request. "Not a strong case, but a real one. She's been sober 14 months. She's employed. She's been engaging with the children in a supervised and consistent way. A judge will look at that." "She abandoned them for 3 years," Cole said. "Which the judge will also look at," Karen said. "But family courts are oriented toward reunification where it's safe. The question becomes what's in the children's best interest, and that's a fact-intensive inquiry." She paused. "Dr. Amara's testimony will matter. The children's own expressed preferences will matter within the limits of what the court will give weight to. And documented evidence of your role as primary caregiver over the past 3 years will matter." "He has all of that," Diana said. Karen looked at her. "Ms. Frost, I want to ask you something directly." "Go ahead," Diana said. "What is your role in this family's life specifically? Because you may be called to testify, and if you are, the other side will characterize your relationship with Mr. Bennett and your involvement with the children in whatever way serves their narrative." "My relationship with Cole is serious and long-term," Diana said. "I've been in the children's lives for approximately 6 months. I attend their events, I spend time in their home. They know me and I know them." She paused. "If that's characterized as something problematic, I'd like to hear the argument." Karen almost smiled. "It won't be characterized as problematic," she said. "It may be characterized as a destabilizing presence, a new variable in the children's lives, something Rachel's side will contrast against the biological mother's claim to continuity." "Rachel forfeited continuity," Cole said. "I know," Karen said. "We're going to make sure the judge knows it too." The months that followed had a particular texture, not constant crisis, but the low-level hum of something serious running beneath everything else, the way a structural problem in a building made sounds in the walls that you couldn't stop hearing once you knew what they meant. Diana's board noticed. Of course they did. Her VP of Communications, a careful man named Stephen, who earned his salary by knowing when things were about to become narratives, came to her in August with a look she recognized. "There's going to be a story," Stephen said. "About what specifically?" Diana said. "About a Frost Industries executive involved in a contested custody case. About you." He set a printed web search on her desk, a gossip blog, minor, but with the specific reach of things that got picked up. Someone had connected Cole's name to hers and found the court filing. The post was thin on facts and heavy on implication, the standard shape of this kind of thing. "How would you like to handle it?" Diana looked at the printout, at her own name in a headline above a paragraph that made her sound like a supporting character in someone else's drama. "I'd like to handle it by not handling it," she said. "No comment, no statement, no engagement." "The board may have concerns. The board," Diana said, "has approved my personal conduct policy, which does not require me to avoid having a personal life. If someone on the board wants to raise a concern about my personal life, they can request a meeting and raise it, and I will deal with it at that meeting." She handed the printout back to Stephen. "Is there anything else?" Stephen looked at her for a moment. He had worked with her for 3 years. He knew what that tone meant. "No," he said. "That's all." 2 board members did request meetings. Both were conversations Diana handled with the same directness she brought to everything else. "Here are the facts. Here is my position. Here is the boundary." Neither conversation went longer than 20 minutes. Neither produced an action item. She told Cole about them that night, matter-of-factly, the way she'd relay any operational development. He listened. Then he said, "I'm sorry you're dealing with this because of me." "You didn't file the custody petition," Diana said. "No, but—" "Cole." She looked at him. "I made my choices. Every one of them. Nobody pressured me into your family's life, and nobody's pressuring me out of it. The board will have opinions, and Stephen will manage them, and in 6 months this will be one line in a year that had a lot of lines." She paused. "I need you to let me own my own decisions." He looked at her for a long moment. That's the most you've ever sounded like a CEO in a personal conversation, he said. Is that bad? No, he said. It's kind of great, actually. The custody hearing was scheduled for late October. In the weeks before it, Dr. Amar submitted her professional assessment, a careful, detailed document that described the children's adjustment, their relationship with their father, their emerging relationship with their mother, and her professional opinion about their needs. She did not recommend against Rachel having contact. She did recommend strongly against the disruption of the children's primary placement. Owen was asked by the court-appointed guardian, ad litem, a quiet man named Patrick, what he wanted. Owen thought about it for a long time and said, I want to see my mom sometimes. I don't want to live somewhere different half the time. I want things to stay the way they are, except with her in it sometimes. Patrick wrote that down word for word. Lena told Patrick she wanted her dad to be happy. Patrick noted this too, with the professional understanding that a 7-year-old's stated wish was meaningful information, but not the whole picture. The hearing was a Tuesday morning. Cole wore a gray suit Diana had helped him pick out on a Saturday 3 weeks earlier, in the specific way they'd done it. Not her telling him what to wear, but her sitting in the chair outside the fitting room and giving honest answers when he asked. He looked like himself in it, which was the point. Diana was in the courtroom. She had not been called to testify. Karen had made the strategic decision that Diana's presence as a witness would give Rachel's lawyer more to work with than her absence, and Diana had agreed with the reasoning. She sat in the gallery instead, in the third row, visible without being central, exactly where she wanted to be. Rachel was on the other side of the room with her lawyer. Diana looked at her once, directly, without hostility or performance. Rachel was thinner than in the photos Cole had once briefly shown her, dark-haired, composed in the specific way of someone who had prepared very carefully for today. She did not look like a villain. She looked like a person who had done damage and was trying to come back from it, which was a thing Diana understood in the abstract, even if the specific damage had been done to people she loved. Cole sat at the table with Karen. His back was to Diana, which meant she spent the hearing looking at the back of his shoulders, at the way he held himself. Straight, contained, the stillness that was his baseline under pressure. She had come to know that stillness, the way you came to know the sounds of a house you'd lived in long enough. Not dramatic, not remarkable, just the particular quality of a specific person she knew. Karen made their case methodically. 3 years of documented primary care. School records, medical records, therapy records, event attendance, activity schedules. The gap. The 3 years of Rachel's absence, without financial support, without contact initiated from her side, without any bridge maintained for the children. The children's own adjusted stability, as documented by Dr. Amara. Rachel's lawyer made her case, the 14 months of sobriety, the consistent recent contact, the biological mother's fundamental right to a relationship with her children. The judge was a woman in her late 50s who asked questions without giving away which answers she preferred, which Karen had described as a good sign, and which Diana could not read one way or the other from the gallery. Closing arguments took an hour. Then the judge said she would take it under consideration and render a decision within 30 days. Cole turned from the table and found Diana's eyes. She held his gaze. She kept her face calm and open because that was what he needed from her right now. Not her fear, not her hope, just her presence, steady and here. He nodded once. She nodded back. Outside the courtroom afterward, in the corridor, Karen talked through the likely timeline, the possible outcomes, what to watch for. Cole listened and asked questions in a voice that was even and professional, the voice of someone who had learned to conduct their emotional life privately. Diana stood beside him. She didn't put her hand in his because they were in a courthouse corridor and Karen was talking and this was not the moment. But she was close enough that their proximity was its own language, quiet and sufficient. When Karen left, it was just the two of them in the corridor. The building moved around them. Clerks and lawyers and people with their own cases, their own hearings, their own long mornings. Cole looked at the ceiling for a moment, then down. However this goes, he said. I know, Diana said. I mean it, he said. Whatever the judge decides. I need you to know that I know what you did today, being here, what it cost. It didn't cost me anything I wasn't willing to pay, she said. He looked at her. His eyes were tired and his jaw was still set from the last 3 hours. But underneath the tiredness was something that had been there since December, something she'd watched grow into its full shape over the months, the specific kind of certainty that didn't need to announce itself. "I love you," he said. First time, out loud, without the circling or the careful management of what it might mean. Just the words, direct and real, in a courthouse corridor on a Tuesday morning. Diana looked at him for a moment. The building kept moving around them. "I know," she said. And then, because he deserved it plainly, "I love you too." He exhaled. He put his forehead down briefly, tilted, and she reached up and put her hand against his face, and he held it there with his own hand over hers, and they stayed like that for a moment that was not long by any external measure, but that Diana would carry with her for a long time after. The decision came 26 days later. Primary physical custody remained with Cole. Rachel was granted supervised visitation twice monthly with a provision for review after 1 year. The judge's written decision cited the children's stated preferences, Dr. Amara's professional assessment, and the documented history of care, but also noted that the path remained open for the relationship between Rachel and her children to develop, slowly and on the children's terms, as they all continued forward. Cole read the decision in Karen's office and sat quietly for a moment after. "That's the right call," he said. Not triumphant, not relieved exactly, just resolved. The way things were when a long, difficult thing arrived at its proper end. He called Diana from the parking lot. She picked up before the second ring. "We won," he said. She sat in her office, alone, door closed, and let out a breath she'd been holding for a month. "Tell the kids," she said. "I'll see you tonight." "Yeah," he said. His voice had something in it she didn't have a word for. Not happiness exactly, more like the specific feeling of having held something precious through a storm and finding it still intact on the other side. "Yeah, tonight." She set her phone down. Outside her window, the city moved in its indifferent, relentless way, 31 floors below. She sat with the feeling for a moment before her afternoon required her again. It felt, she thought, like something that had always been possible finally deciding to be true. The night the judge's decision came through, Cole made dinner. Not takeout, not something simple, actual dinner, the kind that required multiple burners and more than one pot, and the specific chaos of a kitchen being used by someone who was cooking because he needed to do something with his hands. Diana arrived at 7 to find Owen setting the table with the resigned competence of a child who had been assigned this task enough times that he'd stopped negotiating about it, and Lena sitting on the counter, where she was technically not supposed to be, narrating Cole's cooking process in the manner of a nature documentary. "He's adding the garlic now," Lena said when Diana came through the door. "He added too much, but he won't admit it." "I heard that," Cole said from the stove. "I know," Lena said. Diana set her bag by the door and looked at the scene. The cluttered counter, the steam from the pot, Owen putting a fork in the wrong place and correcting it before anyone told him to, Lena's running commentary, Cole with his back to the room concentrating on something that smelled like it was going to be good, and felt something she recognized as the particular fullness of a moment you know, while you're inside it, that you're going to remember. She didn't say anything about it. She just moved into the kitchen and asked Cole what she could do, and he handed her a bowl of bread he'd bought from the place down the street and said, "Just put that on the table." And she did. And dinner happened the way dinner happened in that apartment, loudly, imperfectly, with Owen spilling water and Lena eating around the vegetables she'd been told were not optional, and Cole refilling everyone's glasses without being asked, the whole machinery of a family that had learned its rhythms through repetition and survived things and kept going. Nobody made a speech about the court decision. Nobody needed to. It lived in the room the way important things did when they'd been processed enough. Not as an event anymore, but as a fact, a new fixed point in the architecture of things, something they were all already building on without having to name it. After the kids were in bed, Owen with his current book about ocean geography, Lena with her sketchbook, both of them given an extra 30 minutes without being asked, Cole and Diana sat on the couch with the television off and the apartment quiet around them. And Cole said, "I keep thinking about what Owen said, to the Guardian." What did Patrick tell you, he said? That he wanted things to stay the way they are, except with her in it sometimes. Cole looked at the middle distance. He's 9. He figured out something I've been trying to work out for months. Kids do that, Diana said. They cut straight to what they actually want because they haven't learned yet to be embarrassed about wanting it. Cole looked at her. What do you want? He said. Not what you're willing to do, not what makes sense. What do you actually want? Diana thought about it the way she'd learned to think about real questions. Not reaching for the answer that sounded right, but sitting with it for a moment until the true one surfaced. This, she said, I want this. The dinner and the chaos, and Lena on the counter, and Owen correcting his fork placement when nobody's watching. She paused. I want to keep being here. Cole nodded slowly. Good, he said, because I want that too. It wasn't a proposal. It wasn't a declaration with fanfare attached. It was two people who had both been through enough to know the difference between performance and truth, choosing truth in a quiet apartment after the kids were in bed. And that, Diana thought, was exactly the right shape for it. But shut. November came. The year was winding down, and Diana felt it differently than she'd felt previous years ending, not with the usual stock-taking quality of someone assessing what had been accomplished versus what remained, but with something closer to gratitude, which was not an emotion she had a long history with and which still felt slightly foreign in her hands, like a tool she was still learning how to use properly. She had changed in ways she couldn't always see directly, but could measure in the reactions of people who'd known her before. Her mother, who called on Sundays and no longer spent 10 minutes of every call waiting for Diana to reveal a hidden crisis. Marcus, her assistant, who had stopped hovering in the doorway of her office when she was running late and started trusting that she would arrive when she said she would. Priya, who had told her in the direct way Priya told people things, over coffee one afternoon, that Diana had become easier to work for in the last year. Not softer, Priya had clarified immediately. Easier. There was a difference. Diana had thought about that distinction for days. She understood it finally as the difference between someone who was managing their own fear through control and someone who had gotten honest enough about the fear to stop needing to manage everything else. She had spent the first 14 months after the accident trying to prove she hadn't changed. What she should have been doing, what she was doing now, imperfectly, with regular backsliding, was figuring out who she'd actually become, and whether she could live inside that honestly. The answer, it turned out, was yes. She could live inside it. It wasn't the life she'd planned. It didn't look like the version of herself she'd built her 30s around, and it had cost her things she still, on bad days, felt the weight of. But it was real in a way the planned version had never quite managed to be. She started meeting quarterly with a small group of other executives who were navigating the intersection of disability and leadership. An informal thing, 6 people, a conference room rented for 2 hours. She hadn't started it in order to become a mentor or a voice for anything. She'd started it because a woman named Carol, who ran a mid-sized logistics company and used a prosthetic arm and had the specific, exhausted but functional quality of someone who had been fighting a quiet battle for a long time, had emailed her after a conference panel and asked if Diana ever talked to anyone about the practical realities of this. Diana had written back, "Not really, but I should. Do you want to start?" They'd started. The group grew slowly. People came who needed to talk about access issues and board optics and the specific fatigue of being visibly disabled in rooms where everyone was watching to see if you'd falter. Diana didn't run it like a meeting or perform inspiration for anyone. She just showed up and said honest things about what had worked and what hadn't, and what she wished someone had told her in the first year. She didn't frame it as giving back or any of the other language she'd always found slightly dishonest. She framed it, when she framed it at all, as, "I figured some things out the hard way, and if I can shorten someone else's hard way by a little, I'd rather do that than not." Cole found out about the group 3 months in, not because Diana had hidden it, but because it hadn't occurred to her to announce it. He found out because Carol emailed Frost Industries directly with a question about accessibility consulting, and Marcus forwarded it to Diana with a note asking if this was related to her quarterly meetings, and Cole happened to be in Diana's office when she read it. "You're doing this every quarter?" he said. "Has been a few months," she said. "Why didn't you tell me?" She thought about it. "I didn't want it to be a thing," she said. I didn't want anyone looking at it as if it meant something larger than what it is. What is it? People in a room talking honestly, she said. That's all. Cole looked at her for a moment. That's not all, he said. But I understand why you'd want to call it that. She looked back at her email. Don't make it bigger than it is, she said. I'm not making it anything, he said. I see you, Diana. I want you to know that. She looked up. He wasn't saying it for effect. He said it the way he said the things that mattered, directly, without decoration, meeting her eyes and leaving the words to stand on their own. She nodded once. It was enough. Between them, it had always been enough. Cole proposed on a Saturday in December, 13 months after the custody decision, and 2 years and 1 month after the night in the server room. He did not plan it elaborately. He had thought about elaborate briefly and dismissed it as belonging to a version of this relationship that wasn't the actual one. The actual relationship had started in a cold room at midnight with a broken server and a resignation letter and 2 people who were both somewhere they hadn't planned to be. It had been built in kitchens and courthouse corridors on Tuesday mornings and a diner after a soccer tournament. Elaborate would have been a lie about what it was. He bought the ring from a small jeweler his mother had used for 30 years, a woman named Mrs. Okafor, who asked him 3 questions about Diana: what she did for work, what she noticed first about people, whether she was the kind of person who wanted to be surprised or the kind of person who wanted to know something was coming, and then showed him exactly 1 ring, which was the right one, and which Cole looked at for about 4 seconds before saying he'd take it. He did it at his apartment, on a Saturday afternoon when the kids were home. He had not initially planned for the kids to be there, and then had realized that excluding them would be a misrepresentation of what he was asking Diana to step into. He wasn't just asking her to be his, he was asking her to be theirs in the ongoing, complicated laundry and homework and soccer tournaments way. The kids should be there for that question. He told Owen the night before. Owen listened, asked 1 question. Did you get a good ring? And upon Cole's confirmation, nodded with the gravity of someone who considered this settled. He did not tell Lena, on the calculation that Lena's ability to keep a secret of this magnitude for 12 hours was approximately 0, and that the surprise was something Diana deserved. Diana arrived at 2 in the afternoon expecting lunch. She knew something was different approximately 4 seconds after coming through the door. The apartment was cleaner than its normal Saturday state, and both kids were sitting in the living room without screens, which was statistically improbable. And Owen was wearing the button-down shirt he reserved for events that required button-down shirts. She looked at Cole. He looked back at her. He didn't have the practiced neutrality of someone keeping a secret. He just looked like himself. A little bit nervous, a little bit certain, the combination she'd come to understand as the signature of the moments that mattered most to him. What's happening? She said. Lunch is happening, he said. Also, 1 other thing. Dad practiced what he was going to say, Lena said from the couch. Lena, Owen said. He did, though, Lena said. Cole exhaled through his nose. He crossed the room to where Diana had stopped near the doorway, and he crouched down to her level. Not in the awkward, performative way people sometimes did, but the way he always moved around her, practically and without ceremony, just getting himself to where the conversation actually was. He took the ring box out of his pocket. He didn't open it immediately. He looked at her first. I have been thinking, he said, about what I want to say. I had something planned. It was good, I thought. He paused. I can't remember it now. Tell me what you actually want to say, she said. He looked at her. I want to say that I wasn't looking for this. I was in a server room at midnight trying to do my job, and I found someone who was trying to hold everything together alone, same as me, and I thought that was the whole thing, that we were just similar kinds of broken, incompatible ways. He stopped. But it's not that. What I feel about you is not 2 broken things fitting together. It's something I didn't know I was missing until I stopped missing it. He opened the box. I want to marry you, Diana, not because it fixes anything, because this is the life I want, and you're in the middle of it, and I'd like you to stay. Diana looked at the ring, then at him. Her eyes were dry, which surprised her. She had not cried at her own board meetings when they were the hardest of her career, had not cried in the server room or the courthouse corridor, or the night she'd sat alone with her phone waiting for his updates. And she did not cry now. But something in her chest had opened up to its full size, something she'd been managing at a smaller dimension for a very long time, and the feeling of it at full size was almost more than she knew what to do with. "Yes," she said. Behind her, Lena made a sound that was approximately 70% shriek and 30% the word yes, and Owen said, "Finally," in the tone of a 10-year-old who considered this outcome to have been obvious for quite some time. Cole slid the ring onto Diana's finger. His hands were steady, the way they were always steady. Not because nothing was moving through him, but because he'd decided steadiness was what the moment called for, and he was capable of choosing it. She knew that now. She knew the difference between his stillness as absence and his stillness as decision. She put her hand against his face, the same way she had in the courthouse corridor, and he leaned into it briefly, and then Lena was off the couch and inserting herself into the space between them with the complete absence of spatial self-consciousness that characterized everything she did. And Owen drifted over from his corner of the room and stood close without making contact, the way he always expressed the things he didn't put into words. And for a moment, all four of them were in the same small orbit. It was not a perfect moment. Lena had something on her shirt from lunch. Owen's button-down had come partially untucked. Cole's hair was doing something it did when he'd run his hand through it too many times, and Diana was still in her coat because nobody had given her a chance to take it off. It was ordinary and cluttered, and real, and it was the best thing Diana had experienced in longer than she could accurately measure. They married the following April outside, in the garden of a restored farmhouse 2 hours from the city that a friend of Cole's mother had offered because it was beautiful and accessible and far enough from anywhere that the guest list could stay small without anyone having an argument about it. 40 people. Cole's mother and brothers, Diana's mother, who had flown in from Denver and cried twice before the ceremony even started, Priya and Marcus, and a small number of people from each of their lives who had earned the distance. No photographers hired specifically to document the thing. Diana's mother brought a camera, and one of Cole's brothers had a good phone, and between them they captured enough. Owen walked Diana down the short path from the house to the garden. He had asked to do this, which Cole had told her about the week before, and which Diana had thought about for the following 4 days in the quiet moments between everything else. She had not had a father at her own graduation, had learned young to manage ceremonies alone, and the image of Owen, 11 now, grown half an inch since October, still running like he was angry at the ground, walking beside her with his arm bent formally at the elbow, the way Cole must have shown him, was not something she had known she needed until it was being offered. He was nervous. She could feel it in the slight rigidity of his arm. "You okay?" she said quietly as they waited for the signal. "I've never done this before," he said. "Me neither," she said. He glanced at her sideways. "You've been married before?" "No," she said. "I've never done any of it before. First time for everything." He considered this. Some of the rigidity left his arm. "Okay," he said. "We'll figure it out." "Yeah," she said. "We will." They walked out into the April light together. Cole was waiting at the end of the path, standing with the officiant and Lena, who had been given the specific role of holding the rings because she had lobbied for it with a thoroughness that made argument inefficient. Cole watched Diana come toward him with the expression she had first glimpsed in a courthouse corridor, the one that didn't need to be managed or translated, that just was what it was. She reached him. Owen stepped back to stand beside his grandmother, who immediately put her arm around him. "Hi," Cole said. "Hi," she said. "You look—" He stopped. "Don't overthink it," she said. "You look like yourself," he said. "That's what I was going to say. You look completely like yourself." She understood that. She understood it as the best thing he could have said. They had written their own vows, separately, without coordinating length or tone. Cole's were shorter than expected and more precise. He spoke about showing up, specifically and concretely, about choosing the same person on the hard days and the ordinary days, and not just the days when it was easy to choose them. Diana's were longer and, she suspected, more surprising to the people who knew her primarily as a CEO. She spoke about the server room. She couldn't not. It was the beginning of everything. And about what it had cost her to admit she was failing, and what it had meant to have someone hear that without flinching. She said, "I spent a long time believing that needing help was the same as being diminished. You showed me, without making a lesson of it, that those were never the same thing. I intend to spend a long time returning the favor." Lena presented the rings at the correct moment with enormous solemnity. She had been practicing, apparently, because the handoff was flawless. Owen, from the front row, gave her a small approving nod. They were married in the April light, with 40 people watching, and a garden that smelled like early spring, and Diana's mother crying into a handkerchief that Cole's mother had quietly produced from somewhere and offered without comment. The two women who had been strangers 6 months ago sharing a bench, like people who had decided they were on the same side of something. What came after was not an ending. That was the thing about real life that fiction sometimes got wrong. It kept going after the moments that felt like conclusions, kept adding Tuesdays and school pickups and bad weeks and small repairs. Diana and Cole figured out, imperfectly, how to combine two lives that had both been solo operations for long enough that the merging required actual work. There were arguments about logistics and arguments about parenting approaches, and at least one significant argument about kitchen organization that was, on its surface, about where the cutting boards lived and was, underneath that, about two people who had both been in charge of their own spaces for a long time and were still learning to share. They worked through them. Not with ease, with effort. The ordinary, effortful work of two people who had decided the thing was worth it and were willing to act on that decision, even when the decision was inconvenient. Diana moved into Cole's apartment initially because it was larger and because the children's lives were anchored to that neighborhood, and 6 months later they found a house, ground floor accessible, big enough for everyone, in a neighborhood where Owen could walk to his soccer field and Lena had already identified a weekend art class she intended to attend. The move took 3 weekends and was stressful in the specific way of all moves, and was also, by the end of it, quietly wonderful. Lena claimed the room with the best light and filled it with drawings within the first 2 weeks. Owen put his name on a hook by the back door with a strip of tape and a marker, and something about that small act of ownership, "This is where my stuff goes, this is my house," made Diana have to look away for a moment when she first noticed it. Rachel continued her supervised visits. The visits remained twice monthly and remained supervised per the court order, and the children navigated them with the particular resilience of children who have stable ground under their feet and can therefore manage instability around the edges. Lena remained curious and cautious in equal measure. Owen was, for almost a year, formally polite in a way that was protective of himself, and also, Diana suspected, protective of Cole, as if he was waiting to see what Rachel would do before he committed to anything. Eventually, incrementally, that warmed slightly, not into the thing Rachel might have hoped for, into something more honest than hope. A real, bounded, specific relationship between a boy and his mother who had been gone and was back, with all the complications that entailed and without any pretending they didn't exist. Diana stayed out of it, deliberately and consistently. She was not their mother. She was not trying to be. She was the person who made sure their lunches were right and showed up to their things and helped with homework and had opinions about their opinions that she shared when asked. She was the person in the house who stayed. That was its own specific thing, not a replacement for anything else, but not lesser for not being a replacement. One afternoon, about a year after the wedding, Lena said, out of nowhere, while they were sitting at the kitchen table and Diana was working and Lena was drawing, "Can I call you Mom sometimes?" Diana set down her pen. Lena was looking at her drawing, not at Diana, with the particular deliberate non-looking of someone who has said the thing and is now waiting to see what happens without wanting to watch it happen. Diana thought about what she wanted to say. She thought about it for a moment that probably felt longer to Lena than it did to her. "If that's what feels right to you," Diana said, "then yes." Lena looked up. "I'd still call my actual mom by her name," she said. "I'm not switching. Sometimes I want a word for you that's different from just Diana." "That makes sense," Diana said. "Okay," said Lena, and looked back down at her drawing. "Thanks." She said it twice in the next week, and then settled into an inconsistent usage that seemed to track her emotional state more than any rule. Sometimes Diana, sometimes Mom, the way kids often moved between things without fully committing to either, following whatever felt true in the moment. Diana found this completely acceptable. She wasn't interested in the title. She was interested in the fact that Lena had wanted a word for her, and had asked for one, and that the asking was the thing that mattered. Owen never used it. That was also fine. Owen showed what he felt by other means, by asking Diana's opinion on things before he'd formed his own, by sending her a text after his team won a match in a tournament she hadn't been able to attend because of a work commitment, by sitting next to her specifically when the family watched movies on Friday nights, close enough that their shoulders were touching. Diana understood him. She'd always understood him a little. They were, in some fundamental way, the same kind of person, internal, deliberate, more honest than comfortable. She told him so once, and he'd looked at her for a long moment and said, "Yeah, I know." And she'd laughed, and he'd almost laughed, and that was one of the conversations she kept. 2 years after the wedding, Diana stepped back from the CEO role at Frost Industries. Not in the dramatic way she had once imagined. Not the resignation letter at midnight. Not the disappearance. She had spent 8 months working toward a transition plan with her board, identified her successor, Priya, who had earned it and who would be better at the next phase of the company's growth than Diana would be, an assessment Diana made without ego and without grief, and left in a way that felt, when she looked back on it, like something completed rather than something ended. She did not stop working. That wasn't who she was, and she wasn't trying to become someone else. She went to her quarterly group more often, formalized it slightly, began to understand it as the thing she was supposed to be spending her energy on. She consulted, selectively, with companies that asked for her specifically and asked for the right reasons. She had a home office with a good window and a reasonable coffee situation, and on the days the kids were in school and Cole was on site somewhere, she worked in a quiet that she'd once have called loneliness and had since learned to call something else. She thought sometimes about the version of herself who had been at that desk at 11:47 p.m. with a resignation letter on her screen. Not with pity or distance. She didn't think she was better now in any clean, satisfying way. She thought she was more honest. She knew more about the difference between what she could control and what she couldn't, and she'd done some work on which of those categories she had been trying to collapse into the other. She still got it wrong sometimes. She still woke up angry some mornings with nowhere specific to put it. She still called her mother and said at least one thing she'd later regret, and her mother still said at least one thing in return that made Diana press her lips together and breathe carefully. And they still hung up with something between them that was, examined closely, love doing the difficult work it sometimes had to do to stay real. She still had bad days in her body. Days when the phantom pain came back or the logistics of the world asserted themselves in ways that required patience she hadn't budgeted for. She did not experience these as defeats anymore. She experienced them as weather, unpleasant, real, not permanent, not the whole of anything. Cole had once said, in the coffee shop 2 blocks from the office a long time ago, that being used to something didn't mean you didn't feel it. She'd thought about that sentence more times than she could count. She thought it was one of the truest things anyone had said to her, not as comfort exactly, but as a correct account of what it actually meant to carry something. You didn't get over things. You got more accurate about them. You learned to feel the weight without letting the weight decide where you went. She was not the CEO who had been going to resign. She was also not the person she would have been if none of it had happened. She was something in between that didn't have a clean name, built out of the wreckage of one life and the choosing of another, imperfect in ways she could now mostly enumerate honestly, grateful in a way she still didn't entirely trust herself to say out loud. One evening in the fall, Cole and Diana sat on the back step of the house while the kids were doing whatever they were doing inside, and the air had the specific quality of October evenings, cool and slightly sweet, the sky going dark at the edges first. Cole had a beer. Diana had a glass of water she wasn't drinking. The house behind them was lit and making its sounds. "What are you thinking?" Cole said. "Nothing," she said. Then, "The server room." He looked at her. "Why?" "I think about it sometimes," she said. "That night, what would have happened if the alert hadn't come in?" "You would have deleted the letter eventually," he said. "Maybe," she said. "Maybe not." He was quiet for a moment. "I think about it too," he said. Not what would have happened if I'd gone home on time. Just the fact of it, that it happened the way it did. Broken thing at the right moment, she said. Something like that. They sat with that for a while. Inside, Lena said something, and Owen responded, and there was the sound of movement, footsteps, the refrigerator opening and closing. Diana looked at the darkening sky and thought about the distance between that office at midnight and this back step in October. The distance measured not in miles or months, but in the particular accumulation of small decisions that added up over time to the shape of a life. None of it planned. None of it without cost. All of it, somehow, adding up to this. She reached over and found Cole's hand where it rested on the step between them. He turned his hand over without looking and held hers, the way you held something that had been yours long enough that the holding was just a fact, just the natural state of things. The October dark came in gently. Behind them, the house held its light.